The static station. Arjun woke with a start, the sharp hiss of the pneumatic doors echoing in his skull. The air inside the Yellow Line coach was heavy and humid, smelling of ozone and wet earth. He checked his watch, but the glass was cracked, and the hands were spinning backward, a frantic, circular dance of lost time. He rubbed his eyes, expecting the familiar blur of the Kashmiri Gate platform, but the world felt tilted. He looked at the passenger sitting directly across from him. The man wore the same blue office shirt, the same silver wedding band. When the man looked up, Arjun's heart seized. It was his own face staring back, but the skin was like a poorly rendered digital image, and the eyes were hollow pits of shifting television snow. Arjun lunged toward the window, pressing his palms against the glass. Delhi was gone. There were no tunnels, no signals, no concrete ruins. Beyond the plexiglass lay a roaring ocean of gray static, an infinite sea of flickering pixels that screamed in a frequency only his bones could hear. The train wasn't moving through space, it was tunneling through the end of something. Every seat in the carriage was now occupied by a version of him. There was a version of Arjun with a face sagging like melting wax, and another whose fingers were twitching so fast they blurred into a dozen phantoms. They were all pieces of a life spent in transit, ghostly fragments of the thousands of hours he had surrendered to the commute. The cold steel of the carriage began to sweat. A bead of moisture dripped onto Arjun's hand, but it wasn't water. It was warm, viscous, and smelled of iron. He looked up to see the ceiling panels softening, turning into a rhythmic, pulsating shade of bruised purple. The rivets were becoming pores, and the fluorescent lights were dimming like dying eyes. He tried to stand, but his shoes were fused to the floor. The linoleum had transformed into a layer of translucent, shivering skin. Beneath it, he could see thick blue veins pumping in time with the train's clattering heartbeat. The metal poles were turning into calcified bone, warm to the touch, and slick with a thin film of salt. Nihil, the version of him across the aisle, leaned forward. His voice was a distorted record, scratching against Arjun's ears. "You spent 3,000 hours here," the doppelganger hissed, his jaw unhinging too wide. "Every morning, every evening. Did you think the train wouldn't eventually want its due? You gave it your time. Now it wants the rest." Arjun reached for the emergency handle, desperate to stop the madness. But as his fingers closed around it, he felt no metal. It was a curved rib, wrapped in shivering, exposed nerves. He realized with a sickening jolt that the train wasn't a machine anymore. It was a digestive tract, and he was being slowly absorbed by the routine he had accepted as his life. In the corner of the car, Letha and Nihil were already merging. Their shoulders melted into the fleshy walls, their individual forms dissolving into the collective pulse of the train. They didn't scream, they simply sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion as their identities were folded into the organic hum of the engine. Arjun slumped back into his seat, the strength leaving his limbs. He felt the fabric, now a coarse, hairy hide, stitch itself into his own skin. His legs were becoming the floor. His spine was aligning with the structural ribs of the coach. He was no longer a passenger traveling through the city. He was becoming the very vessel of his own stagnation. His memories began to flicker and pop like dying light bulbs. The face of his mother, the smell of rain on hot pavement, the sound of a lover's laugh, all of it was being wiped clean, replaced by the dull, rhythmic vibration of the tracks. The Yellow Line was no longer a route. It was a vein of golden light in a world of absolute gray. The train slowed with a wet, squelching sound. A digital voice, garbled and dripping with fluid, announced the final stop. The doors slid open like a fresh wound, revealing a horizon of absolute, shimmering nothingness. Arjun tried to remember his name, his home, his purpose, but all that remained was the roar of the static as he arrived at nowhere.